to AI Role Models, a podcast from One Strategy Studio that goes beyond the hype to explore how real leaders are transforming their businesses with artificial intelligence. In each episode, I'll sit down with pioneers from the world's leading brands who are reimagining marketing, insights, and innovation with AI. But we're not here to talk about theoretical possibilities. These are candid conversations about the real challenges, unexpected victories, and practical lessons learned from implementing AI in organizations. Here's today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to today's show, the very first episode of AI Role Models by One Strategy Studio. I'm delighted to be joined today by two of my favorite people at One Strategy Studio, Camilla Pugh, Chief Strategist, and Charlie White, our lead strategist here in the US. In this episode, we'll be getting to know them both a little bit better, hearing more about their personal journeys with AI and what led them to One Strategy Studio, and really going behind the scenes of what it's like to be working in an agency with virtual AI teammates. Charlie, Camilla, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, how you both doing?
Good.
Yeah, good.
Warm here in Dubai. I think not so warm with you, Charlie.
No, you're just rubbing it in, Camilla. It's really snowy here. The kids are like loving it because school's delayed again. So yeah, we've got lots of snow out here on the east coast of the US.
Well, we've got minus 15 here. So when Camilla said she was cold, I was not very impressed, given that she's in Dubai. So
people think it's cold here in Dubai, which is quite crazy.
Absolutely. I was just watching that intro and realized that I have lost quite a lot of hair and quite a lot of beard since we filmed the intro. So yeah, here is a fresh face for a fresh pod. So diving right in. Would love you guys to share just a little bit about kind of your backgrounds, where you spent your career, and kind of what has driven that kind of passion for consumer insights and strategy. Camilla, maybe let's kick off with yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. So I've got about 20 years experience in insight, strategy, and innovation. I started off agency side, working for the big agencies, so Kantar, Added Value. That's where I really got kind of my foundation in insight. Then I wanted to move closer to the business, closer to driving impact in the organization. So I moved client side, starting at Virgin, then EE. But really it was my last two roles that really kind of started my path to AI. So at Samsung, I headed up the insight team for the TV and home appliance categories. And there, being a tech business, it was all about speed, but also driving kind of new thinking, fresh perspectives. And so the traditional methods and approaches often kind of weren't enough for what we needed to deliver on. So that was where I started to think about new approaches. And that led me to my next role, which was at Halion, which was really a transformation role, looking at how we run brand and creative approaches, insight approaches globally, and looking at how we can improve, how we can drive bigger impact in the organization. What are new ways to do that? And so I started doing some consulting in AI, connected with Jonathan, and then joined One Strategy Studio about June of last year, and here I am.
Fantastic. What a journey. And Charlie, what about yourself?
So similar to Camilla, I guess I've been in FMCG in the world of brands and strategy innovation for about the last 20 years as well. You don't often like to admit how long you've actually been in this world. But I started off client side, and I spent most of my early career client side. So way back when I started off working at Boots, so in health and beauty, hair care, really cool jobs when you've just left university and you're kind of out in the wide world. And then I moved into PepsiCo. So worked on brands like Walker's and Quaker. So big iconic brands, doing classic brand management roles. So kind of senior brand managers on those kind of brands. But actually I was really fortunate. So never intended to move abroad, never intended to, kind of go out and explore different parts of the world. But as a family, we ended up moving to the Netherlands. So I spent 3 years in Holland and Amsterdam, joined Philips, had children at Amsterdam, and then we moved out to Singapore. And if I'm honest, when I moved to Singapore, having been client-side the whole time, I went looking for another client-side role, but then rapidly realised that I knew nothing about Asia and that whole APAC area. So ended up jumping to the other side of the fence, and I joined a strategy agency back then called Clear, who are part of M&C Saatchi. And I guess that really sparked my first curiosity in terms of just different categories, different businesses, different approaches to different brand challenges, and understanding what made different businesses tick, and just the variety of challenges and interesting brands that you could work on. So I was a strategy and innovation consultant with Clear for about 5 years, 3 of those in Singapore. So I always smile when Camilla's talking about how warm and lovely Dubai is. And then I moved back to London with them. But at that point, I guess I had a bit of a hankering for going back client side, because the piece that I struggled with as a consultant was you have to let go. And I'm rubbish at knowing when to let go, because I like owning the brand, delivering it, seeing, how it shows up on shelf. So I jumped back into the world of soft drinks, and I joined a business in the UK called Britvic. And so I was really privileged. So for about 7-8 years, I led brands like Fruit Shoot, which is a really cool kids brand with a global footprint. And then more latterly, I looked after if you're British, everybody's heard of Robinson. So Robinson Squash was my baby for about 3 or 4 years. So interesting in terms of seeing, again, kind of strategy, innovation, insight from the other side as the brand director looking after that brand. But my observation was I was always so busy. I was always chasing, what's the sales performance? What's the marketing plan for that year? And I could see this whole world of AI and transformation happening around me, but I was always running so fast, I couldn't get my hands around it. I couldn't really understand it. And when we moved out to the US kind of 12, 18 months ago, the opportunity just came up to work with Jonathan again in this world. And I jumped at it because I'd been in the classic traditional agency space and I'd loved it, but the world's moving so fast. And I really wanted to be at the forefront of that, shaping the future, learning, kind of, let's be honest, being massively out of my comfort zone in terms of what I was doing and kind of experimenting in this world. And that's what led me to the One Strat Studio. And I haven't really looked back. It's been a roller coaster ever since.
Yeah, it certainly has been a roller coaster. So obviously we've all got a few things in common. We've all known Jonathan for many, many years. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan Williams is the founder of One Strategy Studio, super successful agency background, started Clear, started MASH, started Discover AI. And so we've all spent time working with Jonathan in various different guises over the years. And, I remember when Jonathan reached out to me and said, hey, I'm kind of working on my new thing. Would you mind taking a look at it? This is what I'm trying to do. Kind of when he pitched me kind of over a quick LinkedIn message about that, I was a little bit skeptical about kind of what he was sharing and how good could it possibly be. I'd been spent the last 12 months kind of exploring the opportunities for AI in the insights space, but I was really kind of curious about kind of what he had to share. I guess when you both kind of chatted with Jonathan for the first time, I'd love to just hear like kind of what was your initial reaction to kind of seeing the models in action? Were you like me skeptical, and kind of what convinced you to kind of jump on board with a relatively kind of different type of agency, a complete reinvention?
So I started when we moved to Dubai. I started to do some consulting work in AI. And like you, Dave, I think I was a bit skeptical about AI. I was skeptical, and some of the things that I kept thinking was, are we going to get average insights? Are we going to get shallow insights? Where's the depth? Where's the breadth? I was doing a lot of kind of playing with some of the basic tools, and probably at that stage, not really knowing how to work and guide the models in the right way. And some of the output, yes, it was quite generic, but I think that was probably a bit about how I was using it. So I'd started working in the AI space, and obviously, as you say, I knew Jonathan very well. But I'll never forget the day actually where he contacted me and he said, can I just have a chat? I wanted to get your perspective. Can I just show you some of the output that we're starting to get from some of the project work that we're doing? And I'll never forget, because I, recently come out of a client-side role, looking at the output and literally thinking, wow, this is game-changing. This is game-changing. What Jonathan is doing. And I hadn't joined at that stage. I thought I need to be part of this because it is totally reinventing how we think about insight. It's the kind of new agency experience. It's taking that, that traditional process, which can take anything from 6 months, and really accelerating that and getting to great output. And as he talked me through, at that stage, I was, to be honest, I was blown away. And actually now, working at One Strategy Studio and actually working with the models and getting better at understanding the different use cases, the power is even, of what they can do is actually accelerated even more. So, and you can see that from clients. It's a great moment when actually working on a project and you kind of see, when they see some of the output, thinking, wow, this is incredible what you can do, in that short space of time. So in terms of, my initial impressions, that was kind of it when I chatted to Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, that both the technology, the underlying kind of LLMs and their sophistication and their reasoning is improving at such warp speed, alongside what we've been able to do with those models and how they're being personalized. Charlie, what about yourself?
I think it was less skepticism for me actually, and more just pure curiosity. Yeah, in terms of complete fascination with how you could go from a standing start, if you like, in terms of I've got a brief, to fully polished, as you said, Camilla, quality outputs in this promise of an hour, which is what Jonathan had talked to me about. So I think my curiosity was on two areas. So one is, how do you actually do that in an hour? And then within that, actually, as a consultant, how do you get comfortable that the outputs are in the right space to then go and take it back to a client? Because every time I've been a consultant before, I've spent 6 to 8 weeks getting under the bonnet, under the skin of a business and a brand and a team. And you kind of invest all of those hours and all of that color into, you're never going to be an expert of a business in the same way that a brand team or an insights team are, but, getting as close to it as you can. And you just can't do that with the way this works. So I guess my skepticism was more around, how do I get comfortable that the outputs are pushing in the right spaces and the quality of those outputs are where they need to be? And I'll never forget Jonathan saying to me at the very beginning, and I think you said this as well, Camilla, you just need to trust the models. And I think that's true, actually. And that rings true today, because you have to go into this going, I've asked the right questions, I've put the right inputs in, we're looking and hunting in the right spaces. The models know what they're doing, they've been trained and they're brilliant at what they do, and they're our virtual teammates. You have to trust them in the way that you would trust another team. And I think that's the biggest leap, actually, when you're playing in this space, because you've got a very different set of teammates to the ones that you had before, that you would have trusted your old teammates, and you therefore have to trust your new virtual teammates in the same way. I don't know, Camilla, if that makes sense and you'd agree with that.
I think, just to build on that, I think one of the things that I didn't realize fully when I joined One Strategy is how the models actually work and how that's different. And actually, like, when you start to understand that, you see the power of the model. So what's quite clever is that the models have been trained in a way, so it's a creative process that has been prompted. So the models have been trained in a way that mimics that traditional agency creative process, which again, I didn't realize. And when you bring it back to that traditional process, so if you think about it, Charlie, so when we would spend hours in those rooms with Post-its, brainstorming, doing the data merges,
exactly,
using the different creative tasks, the collaboration, etc., to come up with the breakthrough ideas. These models have been trained with that same thinking. So, taking that 20 years experience that we have in kind of insight innovation, then training the models so that they are able to do some of the creative tasks, are able to do some of the strategy. And that, I think, helped me overcome some of my skepticism and the trust behind the models, because actually it's not just like a quick thing and then you get the answer.
Yes, exactly.
Asking the questions, and then the models have actually been trained in the way that we have done it in the past, which again, I think is so powerful.
And I think just as a build on that is, often when we're talking about what we do at the One Strategy Studio, we focus on the 100% automation and the, kind of the power of the models, and the 5 models are truly amazing in terms of what they can do. But actually, I think the bit that we also need to talk about is the role, Camilla, you and I play, because the outputs, they speed up the process for us in terms of the models are doing all the heavy lifting in terms of going out, sourcing the right data, joining the dots, kind of getting to those really compelling opportunity platforms. But it doesn't mean that there's not a manual layer within this, which is where we come in, because we've got the space and the freedom to look now at, well, where are those opportunity spaces? Have we asked the right questions? And then play, tweak, iterate, and therefore, kind of apply some really smart thinking on the top of the models and where they've got us to. And I don't think I'd fully appreciated that when I first talked to Jonathan about joining the One Strat Studio, because all of the conversation was around it's fast, it's efficient, it's 100% automated. But the quality layer is what people like you, me, Ferdy, Matt, etc. bring, because of 20 years of experience of having done this. So you can look at something and intuitively feel like we're pushing in the right direction, or frankly, whether we need to push harder in a certain route or be more challenging with the thinking. And I think that's a quality that the automation liberates us to do. It gives us the freedom to actually use our brains where we're going to add most value.
Yeah, I think Jonathan does a really good job of kind of summing that up. In that traditional agency world, you're getting 10% critical thinking, and 90% of your budget is going towards the kind of doing of the work. And One Strategy Studio have really flipped that paradigm on its head. So now 90% of yours and Camilla's and Matt's and Ferdy's time is really going into partnering with the client and being that kind of critical thinking thought partner. And 10% is focused on the output. Charlie, curious, I guess, how with the models doing so much of the kind of lift, which frees you up to do the critical thinking. Talk a little bit about like the discovery journey you go on with the client when kind of sharing that out, because unlike in a traditional world where you spent 3 months fully immersed in this, it's your baby, it's your work. It's kind of it's a different angle to this.
So
right?
Actually, the bit that I found really fascinating, and I think Camilla, you and I had a conversation about this, is part of the exploratory phase with the models. So when Hayden is doing his thing, is going out and looking for the deeper learnings and some of the more stretchy kind of cultural nuances on the edge of a particular challenge or a question we might be looking for. And often what you get back is some really interesting, stretchy, provocative spaces. But in the early days, I would almost put myself in the client's shoes too early and go, oh my goodness, that's way too provocative. That's just, they're not going to be interested in that. So I would self-iterate to take some of what I thought were really out there provocative platforms and spaces out. And then often what I realized was clients would say to me, oh, this is really interesting. We've got some great core platform stretch, but can we just push the models a little bit harder to push us into maybe this space or that space? And then I'd realized that actually I had, what's the right expression, self-regulated and taken some of what they were asking for out. So that was the bit which was, I guess, a real journey of discovery for me. Not only trust the models, but actually almost encourage the models to keep pushing out and pushing out on the periphery to see where some of these opportunity spaces could come up with, and not to self-regulate, because what I think is too stretchy, I've had several instances of clients going, oh, there's a really interesting spark in there. how can we adapt that? Let's take that thought and then turn it into something that, you know, we can do something with in the next kind of couple of years. That was a big leap for me, because there's a recognition that I'm not an expert in your business, your brand, and so something that might spark for you, I shouldn't remove too early, because I don't know where it's going to go.
And that's also talking to the kind of unbiased, fresh perspective of the models, isn't
Exactly.
it? Because,
yes.
you know, working client side, I know I've certainly, you know, got to a point, you know, if I think about my Samsung days where I was running projects and looking for fresh perspectives, and I just felt like, you know, every project I was doing, you know, and having conversations with internal stakeholders, and we were talking about the same thing, and it was kind of reinforcing those biases.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's, again, one of the, and I think you're totally right, Charlie, when you first see some of the, you know, because we have our core, we have our stretch, we have our provocative platforms. And when you first see some of those provocative platforms, some of them indeed are like way out, you know, and you can actually have that conversation with the client to say, these might be out, but let's keep them here. Because let's at least get the stretch. Let's at least be going getting the fresh perspectives. You know, get the breath rather than being stuck in our, you know, internal biases constantly.
And it's much easier.
That's a good power.
Yeah, and it's much easier once you've got the stretch and breadth to pull back, and that's what the way this is all constructed allows us to do. Because also the other thing that my belief is the way the models are set up and the way they create and go after the data sources, it means we get very quickly to not just a depth of understanding and insight and observations about a topic or a category or a problem, but the breadth of the thinking is really powerful and really unlocks some fascinating conversations with clients. And that's where the value comes in this, because we can go much broader in the initial insights foundation work that we do, which then gets us to these interesting provocative platforms that maybe we wouldn't do if we'd spent 8 weeks immersing ourselves in a business and picking up on some of those biases subconsciously, which might have influenced, you know, how we think about a problem.
And we can go broader, but like Sammy, who's sourcing all the content, he's like, you know, he's like, I think Dave, you mentioned he's like a journalist, isn't he? He's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. So he's going broad, but then he's not just pulling in every single piece of data.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's actually forming, which I think is brilliant, because he's building this picture, or like taking the pieces of the puzzle that tell that deeper story, get to the places, but they all, you know, it's like this curated data set, which he's choosing specifically based on that challenge, which again is getting to these interesting areas, because it's not just like a dump of all the data. So yeah,
100%. So switching up a little bit to kind of client impact, how are the kind of clients and brands that you're working with, how are they kind of reacting to their first experience of working with One Strategy Studio? What are you seeing them kind of excited about?
I mean, I think one of the areas that I think is actually a bit underrated, but actually really powerful as a client, is the iteration that this new way of working allows. Sure. So as you know, as Charlie was saying, we get to great places, but then I think there's a real power in the energy behind the way we work and the iteration behind that. So that, you know, the clients do have an opportunity to say, oh, can we push here? Can we bring these areas in? I'm interested in this. Let's exclude this. Let's shape the platform so they look like this. So there's a lot of flexibility, and you know, that iterative process is actually really energizing, rather than the traditional process where you do the 6-8 weeks, you'd have an agency present, and then you think, I wish I'd added in this, but you don't have the power to do that at that stage. So not only are we getting to kind of that great point early on, but we can build and iterate. And I also think, I mean, you know, brings energy to a process. And in all of the insight work early on, the exploration, you need that energy, you need that buy-in. And I think that's a kind of, you know, a real power. And a lot of clients have said to me, you know, it's great, gets to great outputs. We don't have to make compromises anymore, because we can get, you know, great outputs faster. but actually that iteration is really powerful, and they seem to really love that as well. Charlie, I don't know what do you think on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's actually a degree of playful experimentation that happens with when we're working with the models, and I think that's one of the things that I had to understand at the very beginning, because when you come from the more kind of classic agency world, if a client says to you, "Oh, I'm not quite sure, I think we might need to be asking a question a different way," your instinctive reaction is, "Oh my goodness, I've got the brief wrong, or I've misunderstood, or the focus was wrong." That's not the case here, because the power is in the ability, by asking a question in a slightly different way, it takes you to another interesting set of spaces. So the ability, like you said, Camilla, to iterate, explore, experiment, to just push a little bit harder in a route, and then maybe pull back because actually it didn't quite take us where we thought it was going to be. I think the interesting piece is how you stay energized when you've done the exploration, and then you've got a lot of platforms that you could potentially take forward. So the role that I see us playing more and more is helping clients prioritize and choose which ones they actually want to, kind of stand behind and put their money behind in terms of taking it forward, whether, we then move into an ideas phase or where that might go. Because the power of iteration is the ability to explore, but we need to be able to work together to bring it back to, well, what's really important and where do we focus, and how do we, if you like, finish that loop rather than just staying in that iterative mode, because it's interesting and we can explore. Yeah,
you're exactly right. So it's kind of, our skill is in taking that brief from the client, really understanding what they want, then translating that, pushing the models, getting to a good place, but then landing it in, helping the client land it in the organization. So exactly as you say, sort of prioritizing where they should focus, and then how they should translate that for the organization, and help their stakeholders internalize the content.
And we spend a lot of time talking about the exploratory phase and getting to the platforms or getting to the ideas. But again, there's such a flexibility, isn't there, in terms of how we can share back and, hand over deliverables in a way that can then land within a business. And Camilla, having been on the other side, I think some of the work, Dave, you've been doing in terms of exploring different ways to, it's not just a PowerPoint deck that we might hand over at the end. The different ways we can get to really creative approaches to sharing content, which then a client can take and turn into really engaging content for the organization. I think that's really exciting as well. Because so much of what we're all about is, well, how do you then sell that into the organization at the back end as well?
Exactly.
And how do we help clients do that, rather than saying, here it is, here's the finished PowerPoint, we've finished now, let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think the ability the generative AI gives us to create compelling outputs. Obviously, the core output that we've been delivering has been a PowerPoint deck, but experimenting with multimedia, experimenting with podcast output, video outputs. We're using image generation, all which brings it to life and allows clients to kind of share with their stakeholders in a more engaging format, and again, Camilla benefits from that kind of iteration that you were talking about. So for those of you that are kind of unfamiliar with One Strategy's kind of models, we have 5 models that really represent the core capabilities you'd want from an insights, innovation, and strategy agency. And they've actually been branded. If you've seen the branding of those models, Jonathan's daughter is a huge manga fan, so we've introduced some manga kind of personalization into those models. But each of those models represents sourcing, creativity, narrative, strategy. Camilla, I guess what's it like working with a team of exceptional strategists alongside models as well?
I think actually, when you ask me that question, the first word that pops into my head is actually it's super creative. And it's because I think the models and understanding how they work but also understanding how to work with them. And as Charlie was saying, they do actually become like, I think my kids say to me, "Mummy, so you work with like models all day, or tech models," which it is, but they feel like virtual teammates, don't they? They kind of like, once you understand, how they work, and it's a creative task, taking that brief from the client and then translating that into what you want the output to look like. So you know what you want, but it's then a skill to translate that and to guide. And we have a set of guardrails to guide the models to get to those places. And then feeding that back to clients, and as Charlie was saying, then helping them prioritize, think about that output. So actually, for me, working with the models is super creative, but it's actually, and this is why moving forward in this AI world, I think people sometimes think, oh, what am I going to do all day? It's so boring working with AI. And no, that was one of the unexpected, surprises for me working in AI. It's actually super creative. It's, and it's super challenging. And you're constantly thinking, well, I'm constantly surprised about how you can adapt the models for different use cases. So we started with a lot of kind of product innovation work.
Yep.
But now we're using the models for kind of brand positioning, topic insight. We've done some futures work. We're even looking at things like embedding segments into projects. So, clients that helps kind of embed the segmentation into the workflows in the organization, and every project can be seen through the lens of the demand space and segment. So it's actually the flexibility and the creativity there. And then, the time you can spend actually thinking, which was always, I remember my boss saying to me, Insight should be, we strategic partners to the marketing team, we strategic partners to the, the category teams, but we could never get there because we also had these slow, drainy processes. Yep. And now this is the time for Insight. I really believe that. It's the time to kind of drive that impact, to be those strategic partners that we always wanted to be. So it's actually, for me, it's actually super exciting and creative where we're at the moment.
I find it, I'm very human centric, in terms of, I wear my heart on my sleeve, you know whether I'm in a good mood, bad mood, and I often think things through by talking out loud. And I find myself doing this with the models. And I think it really helps the fact that they have been, they are manga characters. So they're like real people. We talk like, Sammy's going to do this for us, Hayden's going to do that, and then Finn will pick this up. But personally, I find that really helpful, because then what I'm not doing is I'm not talking to a tech interface. I'm talking to a teammate, and it impacts how you write your brief. So, Camilla, you talked about, we obviously have a brief that, forms the framework for the models, but we also write guardrails that are tailored according to the particular challenge or the brand or wherever we're trying to get to, in terms of the type of project it is. But what I mean is, the way you write the guardrails is always best when you're written as if I was talking to Camilla and saying, this is how I'd like a concept to be written, or this is how I'd like the platforms to be described. And by giving these models human characters, it means that you're in the right mindset to actually get to really evocative descriptions of platforms, rather than my experience of working with AI, like, Chat GPT myself, is I'm sort of writing in business language and therefore getting sort of one-dimensional results out of it. So there's a really interesting color in the way that we interact with the models and we play. You also made me smile though, Camilla, in terms of we started off doing a lot of innovation work and positioning work, and the models are learning and evolving all the time, and it's amazing, what they can do. And if I'm really honest, back to that, why did I join the One Strategy Studio? It's that curiosity, but also that sense of, I think I've just about got it. And then Jonathan or Camilla will say, oh, by the way, the models can do this now, or John will say that. And then I'm like, okay, hang on a minute. I've got to now understand a load more stuff these models can do, which is really exciting. And on a personal level, you're just constantly pushing your own boundaries of what you think you can do and what you can get involved in. So I think there's that side of the models, which is fascinating as well. I don't think we've had a client ask us a question that we haven't been able to go back to John and Jonathan and say, well, hang on a minute, there must be a way to do this. how would we do it? And it's off the back of that we've evolved, either the deliverable outputs, or suddenly realize we can do naming projects or barriers projects. And so that's how the offer keeps evolving, because frankly, the model capability is evolving, which is really exciting.
That's a great segue. I mean, as you say, everything's evolving so quickly in this space, and particularly with what we're doing on. What are some of the capabilities that we've been kind of working on internally, without sharing too much behind the scenes? But what are you both kind of most excited about in the coming months ahead?
I think, I mean, Charlie has touched on this a little bit, and I think where, who knows where AI is going to be in 5 years, like the pace of change just blows me away. But I think certainly that bringing to life the outputs, and thinking about just for the next year, really making, so we have our, PowerPoint outputs, but we're thinking about how to bring that to life for clients, how to better engage in the way that they want. So kind of a multi dimensional approach. So is it video? Is it a podcast? Is it, is it image? Is it a mood board? So thinking about our outputs and how we can really use AI in a stronger way to drive our outputs and internalize and drive greater impact from what we're delivering. So I think that's one big area that I'm excited about. And then we're also looking into sizing. So at the moment, it's very early explorative phase. So, qualitative in nature. But we are looking at, when we identify our platforms, identify our opportunities and ideas, can we do some early validation to give that confidence and to give a kind of hard number behind our platforms? So a lot of clients are asking us that. And as Charlie says, where there's a will, there's a way. So we're finding a way to deliver that and, providing those numbers. So I think that's an exciting pilot that we're kicking off and we'll be launching this year. So those are kind of the two big things for me, just for the immediate year, that I'm excited about.
Sure.
There's a couple for me, actually. So one is, again, this comes back to how we can just flex and evolve what the models can already do. So we can run multi-market projects and kind of, so look at it from what are the nuances depending on which market that we might be wanting to dig a little deeper into. And there's some really interesting work happening behind the scenes about how we can embed client segmentations into the models, so we can pull out the nuances of what it might mean for different demand spaces or occasions and need states, depending on how a segmentation works. And I think that's really interesting, because we've always had the ability to feed in client insight data documents, but having sat on the other side of the fence, that's really valuable when you can tie it straight back to an opportunity space that you can ladder straight back to a need state, or ideas and how they play against that. Yeah. But the other piece that I think is really interesting is just thinking about the teams we can add value with. And again, this comes from having sat and kind of run a brand like Robinson's. The capability is really well understood by insights teams, brand teams, innovation teams. But we've been having a really interesting conversation recently with a client about how we can support their R&D function more overtly. So how can we turn our opportunity platforms into effectively, like R&D briefs, so profiling different product experiences, etc. I find that really fascinating, because I've lived the experience of, I've got a winning concept. How does that now translate from a development perspective into something we might launch? So it's finding ways to add value to more teams within a business using the frameworks that we've got. So just being a little bit creative about how we might apply them. I think that's a really interesting way to support teams.
Yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening there. So as we kind of close out, I want you to kind of put yourselves back into your kind of client side experience and kind of you're running in, you're head of insights, head of innovation for a major brand. What advice would you be giving to people in those roles that are everyone's on a slightly different trajectory in terms of their journey and exposure to AI so far and what's possible, but what would be the kind of advice you would give to them around kind of the opportunity that AI unlocks for them and their teams?
I think really just have a go. I think it's, as we were talking about, it is a lot about, AI is here. The pace of change is rapid. We need to be, at the forefront, ideally, of that change. And as a client, we need to be thinking about, how that shapes our organization, what skills we need to build. So, Charlie and I were talking about, it's not about the answers, about asking great questions, that critical thinking, honing that, being those strategic partners, as I mentioned before. So thinking about, what this means for the organization, and doing that through, experimenting, having a go, building the internal use cases to share and demonstrate the value of AI. I think also with that, it's about being brave. Trust the models, trust AI, and with us, it's about humans and AI. So it's the kind of agency experience you'd get with the AI automation at the back end, so sort of guiding along. So be brave, and then I think there is a little bit of kind of discernment in there. So there's loads of talk about AI. I mean, I think one of the clients I was speaking to was saying every conference is AI, every second agency is talking about AI, and they're kind of different types of AI. I suppose there's the AI add-ons. There's the kind of really basic tools which might get you to outputs, but they might be very superficial. They might not be good quality, and I think knowing that that's not all AI. So having a go, in terms of there are different ways to think about the models when you go into the process and pull that out, we can get to great places. So I think a little bit of discernment to think about, what type of AI model is this? Is this a real AI model or is it just an add-on? And then, thinking about the use case and how that's really going to add value for the organization. So those three things really. So just, have a go, be brave, and just be a little bit discerning.
I think my build on that would be, if I was sitting in a client side role still, I would want to understand what's my ask of AI? What's the job I want it to do for me? So is it about speed and efficiency and solving some of the everyday tasks that kind of the team can automate, and it gives them more time to think about kind of really important big things, and therefore we can do that in-house if we've got the right capability, the right resource, the right training, versus what are the bigger set pieces, what are the big strategic challenges that actually you do still need an outside-in opinion on, because then that's when I would look to where do I need to look outside to an agency like us, for example, in terms of that exterior AI expertise, because it's the difference between I want to do it in-house versus actually I want some provocation from the outside. And I think that's quite important, because we'll get to a state where everybody will be able to access AI. And as you said, is it just an add-on, Camilla, or what's the role? What type of model is it? And we made a deliberate decision not to turn our models and our setup into software, because there is a recognition that actually there's a skill with asking the right questions, and the more you spend time immersed in this world, the better you get at it, and it just creates a different type of consultant. And frankly, client teams are running so fast that having the space, the time, the energy to ask the right questions, to really probe, you still need to find the right partnership. So I think that's the interesting evolution of the world we're moving into, is what type of partners do I need in this space? And I think clients will get far clearer in terms of, right, every day I can do it myself, versus no, there is still a need to look outside and get outside support.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for the time today. It's been great to hear a little bit more of your journey with AI so far, the impact and transformation we're seeing across brands, and share a little bit of kind of what's going on behind the scenes and what's happening in the future. A great conversation as ever. This is obviously the first episode of many. We've got some incredible guests lined up over the coming months who are all going to be sharing their personal journeys with AI and what it's unlocked for them. So it's goodbye from me and goodbye from the team, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to AI Role Models. Follow now wherever you get your podcasts to be notified of new episodes. Connect with One Strategy on LinkedIn to join us for live recordings. Don't forget to leave a review, and we can't wait to see you again soon for our next episode.